What's happening, everybody? Nick Olson, Chupacabra Off-Road, and today we're talking about buying a used side-by-side. Got some tips and pointers, things I've learned over the years, and some things to think about if you're purchasing used. There's a lot of vehicles out there where guys have already spent a lot of money on their accessories, so that might be a better route for you. You could end up saving a lot of money if you find a unit that hasn't been hammered or ridden too hard. So here's some of my top suggestions on things you should consider before you go buy a used side-by-side. So let's talk about where you should be looking to find the best deals. My personal experience, starting off with my favorite website of all time, is racedesert.com. There's a lot of cool off-road vehicles on that website in the classified section, and the UTV section is pretty robust. There's a lot of really nice dialed vehicles on there. And then furthermore, obviously, the biggest thing that people have really taken over is Facebook Marketplace. Now, for years and years, of course, it was always Craigslist. Always harder to deal with Craigslist people. They're anonymous. You never know what they are. But now with Facebook Marketplace, you can kind of see the guy's profile, get a little bit more information about feel of the person that you'd be potentially buying from. The search engine's gotten so good on Facebook that it works really well. I do think Craigslist is a place to look. A lot of dealers are still advertising heavy on Craigslist. And if you are looking to finance a used unit and potentially pick up an extended warranty, that still might be your best option. Definitely check out a lot of those dealers. A lot of dealers love taking in used side-by-sides on trades because they know they're going to get a lot of attention, draw somebody in, and they might try to flip them on a new unit. So check out all three of those, and that's where I think you're going to have the best success of finding what could be your next side-by-side. All right, so starting off, here's some questions I would ask the seller, either before you went to go look at it or when you go to check it out. So first off, has it been in a crash? You know, there could be something where it's a mild tip over, couple scratch plastics, not that big of a deal. There could have been something that's more major. Depending on the crash, it could result in having to have the frame replaced, potentially be totaled, have a salvage title. It's really important, and a lot of these things, they do get tipped over, you guys. You probably follow UTV fails on Instagram. I mean, it happens. So definitely ask if there's been a tip over at all or any type of crash. I always like to ask where it's been driven. Is it a vehicle that's been mainly in the sand dunes? That's good and bad. Good because it's probably not going to have a lot of scratches or a lot of interference with rocks and brush, but it also is harder on the driveline, particularly if you're running paddles and you're not getting any wheel spin. So that always gives you kind of a good feeler of what the vehicle's condition is going to be like. I like to ask, what air filters do people use? Coming from the dirt bike world, especially once the dirt bike world went from 2-stroke to 4-stroke, we really had to learn how to be on top of our air filters. If you didn't change them out, it could result in a lot of expensive motor damage. So it's really important that you keep your motor breathing fresh air. I run the higher quality Donaldson air filters that Polaris makes as an accessory. I think the standard OEM paper filters work well, Canam, Polaris, and whatnot. Now, there's definitely been some debate in the community about paper filters versus oiled filters like a K&N. From what I've heard in research, I'm a big fan of paper. I'd prefer to see, if I was buying something used, that the owner use only paper filters, particularly OEM or something a little higher quality like the Donaldson stuff that I run. A couple other things to ask is, do they use a wheel bearing greaser? Do they zerk the fittings, like on the sway bar here of my Razor Turbo? And what type of oils and lubricants do they use? You can just kind of feel somebody out and see if they're thinking carefully about these type of things. I just purchased my first wheel bearing greaser, sold many vehicles without ever using one, just trying to step my game up and get better with that maintenance and those type of things that people are thinking about or using or doing. It just kind of shows you what type of owner it is and how much care was taken into the unit beyond just maybe checking the belt, changing the fluids, and then changing the air filter. All right, guys, step 2, here's some visual checks, or probably even smarter, get some photos of these detailed shots before you even go take time out of your day to go check it out. This is going to give you a really good reference on how abused the vehicle has been and if it's worth your time to even drive out and look at it, let alone make a serious offer on it. So starting off, definitely make sure you're looking under the transmission at the rear skid plate. Now, me owning a lot of 4-seaters over the years, you're kind of always hitting those things on rocks. Off-roading in general, it just happens, particularly when I was running tires smaller than 32-inch. And now that I've run taller tires, now I'm running 33s. I hardly ever drag the bottom or hit it on rocks on all different types of situations. It's just a wear item. It's the first thing where the vehicle's going to hit. I can tell you firsthand, if you look at our race car, the bottom and the back of the car, when you're hitting stuff hard, when you're really going fast, that's where you're going to hit the ground, whether it's whoops, rocks, high speed, low speed in general. So make sure you ask for some detail shots before you go check it out if you don't see them in the product listing, which you're probably not. Another thing while you're looking at the back of the vehicle, make sure you check out the rear trailing arms. Now, I've owned mainly Polarises. That paint comes off without even trying. I've since invested into some mud flaps, but they're really designed for me in the desert to keep rocks from getting inside of my rear wheels, potentially scratching, breaking the rear wheel. That's definitely a tip for you guys that own X3s, especially those OEM wheels. They're really soft. I was out on a ride with my buddy's X3 and we didn't hit anything hard, but we ended up flattening the tire because we got a rock inside of the rear wheel. So that's something when you're going fast, particularly here in the desert, a rock can kick up from the four-wheel drive, get in your rear wheel, affect your back brake, but then look at all that type of stuff as you're paying attention to the rear trailing arms. Can-Am Polaris, the paint just comes right off really easily. Make sure if a guy has touched up or repowder coated them, see how they look. And that's something that you might not have to deal with as much if you're looking at a side-by-side that's mainly been in the dunes. So this tip might be the most important, and that is to look at the accessories, check out the wiring. Definitely pop the hood and see how good the wiring job is or isn't with the accessories. Most of all these side-by-sides used, you're gonna see some type of additional lighting, maybe seat heaters, more switches, more accessories, of course. So see how good the guy was. Hopefully all the wires have been hidden. You definitely don't wanna look at anything where a guy's kind of throwing stuff together and zip tied it up the roll cage, particularly if you got an aftermarket roll cage. Like, guys, if you're gonna spend the money, you know, on a nice roll cage, take the time to have it wired correctly. Myself, I've done some basic wiring with the Polaris. It's pretty easy. You got the bus bar up front so you can easily run your lights and drill in a few holes, or even on the OEM cage, you can kind of go right through them without too much hassle. So I've paid to have vehicles wired, had my buddy Andrew help me wire. Guys like him are just really detailed, and that's the type of guy you always want to buy a unit from, just because you know there's a less chance of having a rat's nest, having something that could start a potential fire. I mean, there's guys that they get really, really janky with some of their wiring stuff. They're using doorbell wire and whatnot. So double check those items. All these newer side-by-sides, pop the hood on the Polaris. Make sure on the X3, the accessories of the Ram, that you see that they're fused, they've got quality wire, they're protected, and there's nothing that can lead to any issues. The tires, that's definitely a good wear indicator. You can get a good idea of what the percentage is left on those, and double check and make sure there aren't any plugs in the tires. And when you take it on a test drive, make sure you get it up to 30 or 40 miles an hour, not just to make sure you can see what the motor feels like, of course, but from there you tend to feel a little bit more vibration. Now, my vehicle's got some 33-inch tires on beadlock wheels. We haven't had them balanced, but when you get on a highway in particular, you get going faster, 60 miles an hour, you can feel more vibration. So it's important that you're feeling vibration, and hopefully you can feel, is that coming from the wheels being out of balance? Or is it from the driveline? What are you feeling? But you're not gonna feel that unless you at least get above 40 miles an hour. So hopefully they get the person's neighborhood to go check it out, and we'll let you open it up. You can see what she sounds like, see what the belt feels like, and most important, see if there's potentially a bigger problem, hopefully not with the driveline vibration. And finally, since we brought up fluids, make sure you pull the dipstick. The fluid should be at the right level, and of course the oil should be a light brown. Always like to ask when the last time the service was done. Hopefully anybody that's selling one of these is gonna do a nice fresh service on it before they go to post it and get rid of it. All right guys, let's talk about a few red flags that would definitely be concerning. Starting off, when you go to check out the vehicle, is the guy's garage messy and disorganized? You know, I've been there myself, but I always try to make sure I'm somewhat clean and organized. I've gotten more organized over the years. That's just kind of an indicator of how much TLC he's putting into this vehicle versus guys that are just going out and romping it all the time. The tip over thing for me, guys, is kind of a deal breaker. I think there's just so many out there. Unless it was just a really mild tip over, they were really honest about it, and it wasn't anything that required, you know, a frame change or even changing out A-arms, that type of stuff. Because even if a guy did rip the corner off of a vehicle, chances are he might have tweaked a sway bar that he may or may not have replaced or done some other damage, that type of thing. So that's a little concerning for me. I don't know if I would commit to something unless it was a really, really cheap deal. And finally, one thing that's a pet peeve of mine is guys that use wheel spacers. I don't know why people do. Sometimes they're running a big tire like on a 64-inch X3 and they're trying to make it fit on the stock trailing arms. I'm really not a fan of the wheel bearings. Again, I think you should be picky about that. If they have used wheel spacers, I might avoid the vehicle altogether. One quick thing to consider, this vehicle's got about 1,200 miles on it. I'm a little over 60 hours. The average miles per hour, when you break it down, is under 20 miles an hour. So, you know, I run this stuff in more high-speed environments versus a lot of you guys across the country might be doing some slower rock crawling stuff. You know, just kind of helps you fill it in if you're thinking about something with a little bit higher mileage. For me, high mileage, I think is different across the country. Like in Arizona, we're pretty street legal. So there's guys that have easily put 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 miles plus on them, and more of the used market tends to be that, versus like when I lived in Southern California, you know, it's just harder to put that many miles on them because every time you take it out, you've got to trailer it. So in general, you're probably going to see in Southern California, other parts of the country, vehicles with lower miles just because that's how it is. So the mile doesn't really tell everything. A lot of those highway miles these Arizona guys could be running could be, you know, low stress miles. So just something to think about as it pertains to what I would consider high mileage. I would try to stay under 1,500 myself. Just depends on your budget, what you're looking for. I think there's a lot of people that, since this side-by-side market's exploding, their friends have one, they get into it, they think it's cool, they try it a couple times, they don't like eating dust. You know, this is an acquired taste sport, and you know, they don't like dust, it's too hot, you know, so on and so forth, and they want to get out of it. Or there's maybe the grandpa unit, which is the holy grail, you know, a guy who takes it slow, he doesn't beat on it, he's meticulous about his maintenance. But even some of those grandpas here in Arizona, they're retired and they put on some serious hardcore miles. So I think you got to feel out each guy and each owner. But you know, mileage is something to obviously consider in terms of relating on the price, and you definitely see the prices come down quite a bit if guys have over 2,000 miles on them from what I've seen. All right, so thanks for watching. I hope you guys got some value out of this video. Hopefully it gives you a couple things to think about when you're looking on the used market. Like I said, a lot of good deals out there, a lot of different versions of different models. It's getting really confusing. A Can-Am X3 XRS has multiple different models now, similar with Polaris. It's really hard to pinpoint what the value is. I would look for higher quality name brand accessories. Those type of things are stuff that's really expensive, like a Baja Designs light, Madigan cage. I get a lot of compliments on these type of products. People love those. They tend to pay more for them. And I would too if I was looking for a used vehicle. You know, I'd want a lot of these high dollar accessories. That's where you can really save your money. You know, high quality tires, things that are important to me, like all the items I just mentioned. Maybe you're a stereo guy and it's got a, you know, stage 5 Rockford Fosgate. Those aren't cheap, and if it's already installed and you like it, you know, that might be what you want. So I hope this gives you guys some things to think about. So please like and subscribe if you guys like the content. Thanks for watching. We've got a lot more coming your way.